So I'm going to be talking paranormal PA. I'm going to just throw everything together. Normally I talk mostly cryptozoology because of my latest book that I've done. But I'm going to talk the whole thing. Now a lot of stuff you've already heard from John and Stan. But first a little bit more about me. Yes, I started a paranormal group back in 1996. You ask a lot of people, how did you get started? My story is not all that exciting. I actually started out trying to disprove a local urban legend. I didn't get to see a UFO or I didn't get to see a ghost pop up in front of me. But I started out researching these old buildings called libraries. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of those things. That's where I started out. Started researching in libraries, trying to figure out if this local urban legend was true or not. One thing led to another, and ultimately we formed a ghost group, and I was asked to be the leader. Actually, I wasn't asked, I was told I was the leader. But it was a lot of fun, and ultimately in 2011, I decided to pull the plug on the ghost group for a number of reasons, personal and some political reasons from within the group. But we'll keep it clean here, there's families here. I've also worked with a number of groups, a number of organizations, because for me, I'm an amateur. I never stop learning, I never stop growing. And I can learn from a lot of people, such as John Ventry and Stan Gordon. These guys are a wealth of information. You guys are lucky to be able to come out here and meet those of us that have been doing this. Hopefully I can teach somebody something as well and follow in their footsteps. But I've worked with a number of organizations. MUFON, Mutual UFO Network. I was a field investigator trainee, was not an actual investigator. But I did learn from their field investigator's manual. If you have any interest in UFOs at all, I highly recommend getting your hands on it. It's a little expensive, but currently I'm actually writing a book very similar to my other books, which I'll talk about here in a second, that will be a little cheaper than that. It'll teach you how to investigate UFOs. I'm also a member of the Cleveland Ufology Project, also known as CUP. CUP is one of the oldest continuous research and investigative UFO outlets in the world. We meet the third Saturday of every month, which is today. So I'm not going to be there. Got involved in cryptozoology a number of years ago. Again, I'm from Ohio. There's a lot of cryptid groups in Ohio, but they're essentially all Bigfoot-based groups. And I had a very hard time getting into any one of these groups, let alone get interviewed or anything. And they were very standoffish. But I found a group out of British Columbia, Canada, Sasquatch Research Initiative. I didn't have to relocate there. I just had to go through some tests and different things. They just wanted to steal me out.
It's starting to rain. Anybody who has your car windows up?
It is starting to rain. Anybody who has the car windows up, you might want to go close them. Thank you.
Wasn't me, I didn't do it. Alright, so I've also worked with the Pennsylvania Bigfoot Society and currently also with the Pennsylvania Cryptozoology Society, which is a group formed by Eric Holden. Also do a group for Ohio, for paranormal groups called OhioGroups.com. That's for researchers and investigators of paranormal phenomena to find groups local to them, as well as for clients, people who are having things going on in their house. They need help, they need direction, they need guidance from people in the state. I have everything broken down by sections. Also mentioned Paranexus. Paranexus is a professional organization. Again, it's a lot of people together that know a lot of things that I don't know, that I've learned from them, and I've stuck with that for a number of years, and now I'm the executive director. Also an author. I have 5 books to date, and this presentation here is going to kind of cover the whole gamut of my books that I've written. Starting out in 2008, I wrote a book for the amateur paranormal investigator or researcher. how to become a successful paranormal group. It was something that, back in that time, I had my group broken down and rebuilt a number of times. And my goal here is kind of leave a legacy, teach and train people, lower the learning curve of groups coming in, because it seems like there's a big struggle when paranormal groups come onto the scene. They're only learning what the other groups are doing. Monkey see, monkey do. So using my knowledge, my experience, my resources, trying to lower that learning curve again, like I said. Second book there is Benny's Ghost. That was a little thing I wrote for my researchers, investigators, to allow them to understand how I approach my casework. Third book was a kind of a continuation of the first book, Handbook for the Amateur Paranormal Investigator 2, The Art and Science of Paranormal Investigation. And that was for more interviewing skills, which is kind of a lost thing. And it's the art, because there's a lot of things that go into interviewing somebody. It's not just asking a bunch of questions. And the science part is the science of paranormal investigation, kind of looking at how things work with the tools and technology and how they don't work, which then led to my fourth book, was actually when I quit, or I should say shut down my group in 2011, kind of became an independent researcher, and I wanted to look at paranormal investigation from a different view, a different angle, and kind of go back in time and look at psychical research and parapsychology, and how can I improve upon what we've been doing. And I came up with a thing called the E4 method, which I could stand up here and talk about for 2 hours, but that's not what we're here for. The E4 method is essentially eliminating the subjective paranormal investigation, which is kind of weird to say that, establishing some actual science, some controls, which we'll talk about that throughout this presentation, and a lot of different things that kind of go against the grain that a lot of people don't want to hear, but it makes a lot of sense every time I talk about it at convention. 2014, my latest book, my first edition of it came out, Handbook for the Amateur Cryptozoologist, where I try to, got that book on. Is it good? Okay, I was hoping you wouldn't say it. It was horrible. Try to write a very balanced approach. I can easily write a book that would appeal to everybody. Bigfoot here, Bigfoot there, Bigfoot everywhere. They're real. I could say that in a book and everybody would buy it and they would clap their hands, yay. But to write a balanced book that has skepticism and believability, not that easy to do, trust me. It took me about 5 years to do it. There's a guy named Benjamin Radford, who's a skeptic. He's the deputy editor of Skeptical Inquirer magazine, which is the largest skeptical magazine in the United States. Offered to read the book and write it up in the magazine. I was a little nervous about that, but I sent him off a copy, and I was surprised that we got a favorable review in that magazine. So that was like my shining moment for writing this book, was that I did it. I actually provided a balanced look at it. And it also attracted the attention of a gentleman named Lauren Coleman. He's a pretty prominent researcher and investigator in cryptozoology, a lot of anomalous and strange phenomena as well. He wanted to sell it in his bookstore in Portland, Maine, the International Cryptozoology Museum, which is more than a bookstore. And so my book is now there, and he offered to write a foreword for the book as well, which is really, really exciting. So that's my books, that's what I've done, my work so far. But let's break it down and let's start talking about some stuff here. We've already heard a lot of this from Stan Gordon, some of the famous cryptids that are here. But what is cryptozoology? It's more than Bigfoot. It's more than tigers and things, and all these weird things creeping around the woods. Cryptozoology basically breaks down, crypto is hidden, zoology, or zoo we know is animals, and ology is the study. So it's the study of hidden or undiscovered animals. Now it looks like a technical term, right? It sounds like something, I'm going to sign up and take classes, I'm going to graduate, get my PhD in cryptozoology. Well, unfortunately, it's not a recognized science at all, even though it has a fancy ology at the end. You can take classes on cryptozoology, but it's not an academic pursuit. And I have some links here at the end of this presentation that you can look at, some schools. Now, cryptozoology versus zoology or biology is that it's based more on folklore, it's based more on stories, reports. People go to stand and report these things. These are not commonly known animals or commonly known things that are happening in these areas. And historically, it's based on folklore. Apes in the woods. We talked about that with somebody at the table earlier today. Monkeys and apes reported early on. People said that that's not true. There's no way there's giant man-like creatures living up in the mountains. Yes, there were. Mountain gorillas, discovered in 1903. They were true, but a lot of people didn't buy into them. Scientists thought that they were not legitimate. Now, what about the paranormal aspect? We always equate cryptozoology to paranormal. There's only part of that that's true. You have things like the Jersey Devil. You have Mothman and a lot of other weird combinations of creatures and weird things that happen. Those are more of the paranormal types that break physics. They break DNA things. There's no way an owl and a man can mate. I don't think so. I'm not going to try it, but I don't think that those things can exist in nature. However, there are creatures like that, owl man, that exist in England. People have seen them. It's been documented. Whether it's true or not, I don't know. If anybody wants to buy me a plane ticket, I'll go check it out. But cryptozoology, the way I like to look at it, I break it down into three things. Out of time, out of place, and out of this world. Out of time, well, I got plenty of time. I have 45 minutes. Out of time are essentially animals. Stan touched on this. Dinosaur-like animals. They had their day. They're extinct. They're gone, right? 65 million years ago, they died out. Well, John would argue otherwise. But still, either way, they're gone. However, there was a fish discovered in 1938 called the coelacanth. The coelacanth was only known by fossil records. Scientists thought this fish is gone, it's had its day, it's a kind of a bridge between ancient fish and modern day fish. So it was kind of historical in that regard, but they got off, they were gone, didn't exist anymore. Until a fisherman in South Africa hauled one up. Here it is. And by just chance, somebody noticed it, thought it was weird, and took the fish home in a cab. Imagine that cab ride. I think she had to tip a little extra. This fish, it took a few more years to find another specimen, and here we have what is called the greatest animal discovery of the 20th century. An animal that was supposed to be extinct for 65 million years, swimming around in the ocean. And locals knew about it. It didn't taste good, so that's why they didn't talk about it. Or maybe it did, and they just didn't want other people to know about it. But folklore, the locals knew about this animal. Out of place, these are, you could talk about the Black Panther. Black Panthers are basically melanistic cats, big cats. Essentially you have the jaguar, which the jaguar is a North American and South American animal, and they are in the United States, believe it or not. Out west, there have been seen, captured on trail cams. Scientists are studying, I think he's even got a name, for the one that's in Arizona. But the melanistic version, you can actually still see their stripes and all their stuff. You just have to kind of get a little closer to look at it. They're not completely jet black. And you also have the leopard. The leopard is the African version of the big cats. Neither one of those really should be in Pennsylvania. So if we do see them, they're probably an exotic pet, exotic animal that's escaped, or who knows, maybe the jaguars are making their way to Pennsylvania. Who would know? That would be kind of scary. Monkeys, the cat monkeys. Did you know that there are 2 places in the United States where cat monkeys are free, roaming around in the woods? It's true, believe it or not. One place is Morgan Island in South Carolina. They're actually on an island. They can't get off of the island unless they're really, really good swimmers, or they steal somebody's kayak, which people actually do go out and kayak and take pictures of. I'll look it up on the internet. There's plenty of pictures. Now, they were rescued from a lab in Puerto Rico. They were going to be put down, and somebody put down money to save them and put them on the island. So we did it. Another place is in Florida. It's called Silver Springs. There's a river right next to the Silver Springs River. It's like 14 letters long. I don't like to pronounce it, so I just use Silver Springs because that's much easier to memorize. At the juncture of these two rivers, there's about 300 to 500 macaque monkeys that live in the woods. Free and easy. Again, if you want to rent a kayak, you can go out there and check them out. These, again, were brought here by a gentleman who was trying to build up his nature reserve, nature park, and get a lot of visitors to that location. Ever heard of a glass bottom boat? That's where they were invented. Silver Springs, Florida. And out of this world, I already touched on that. These strange flying creatures, things that break physics or break the laws of nature completely. So, what are the famous ones? Well, my goodness, we've already talked about all these. Bigfoot, there he is. Jersey Devil, I know it says Jersey. I don't know how you guys feel about that, but he does kind of border Pennsylvania. There's been a number of sightings in more of the, obviously the eastern part, southeastern part of the state. Black Panthers, again, melanistic big cats. And science says that cougars or mountain lions cannot be melanistic. Their DNA does not allow it. There's never been one seen in nature, never been one seen in a zoo. However, we do know that jaguars do exist in the western United States. We also know that mountain lions exist out there as well. Who's to say, if there's a little funny kitty business, that they can't produce some offspring that has that DNA that can turn that switch off and on. So it is possible. Not likely, but it is possible. Apes and monkeys, which is weird. We have the same thing in Ohio. We have a lot of monkey sightings. A friend of mine, Jody Cook, actually found a baboon skull in the woods just north of Cincinnati. Well, kind of east of Cincinnati in the woods. Cougar, yes, they're not supposed to exist. Are they released wild exotic animals? Yes, but also animals are making their way from the west. I have a theory on that. It's actually in my book. You want to know the theory? I'm just kidding. They introduced wolves in South Dakota in the mid-1990s. They were dying off. They wanted to reintroduce these animals. And they exploded in population, and they've been moving in all directions. And we know cats and dogs don't always get along. Maybe they do at home. But out in the wild, it's like oil and water. They don't get along. So my theory is you have a large concentration in the west of mountain lions and cougars. Not a whole lot of range left for these animals to continue.
I just did a study on the wolf and coyote in Pennsylvania. We're showing 90-pound animals, and Penn State discovered this. That now we're showing that the wolf strain, we know the emergence of coyote, so the wolf strain is predominantly coming out bigger. So we know for a fact we got some big dogs here, right? And mountain lions here as well.
Yeah, and it's forcing the cats out this way.
Yeah.
And we've already talked. Mountain lions we're just deemed extinct. The eastern cougar, which is a derivative of just the main cougars. But actually not until 2011 was official. They put the stamp on there. But the last mountain lion seen on the eastern coast was 1930s, 1936, I believe. So they've been gone for a while. But with these wolves and coyote populations blowing up everywhere, these mountain lions are looking for a new range. And a male will travel 350 miles in a week just looking for a new range. So that's why we're seeing these single reports of cats. Now when you're talking about seeing families of cats, that's exciting because that means that they found a mate and they're having litters of kittens, which is really, really good. And I know in Ohio they have talk of actual lions, African lions, being out in the wild. However, that's just your typical cougar sighting. The females don't have the mane, so people are confusing that. One thing that we didn't talk about is Tommy knockers. Knockers, as they're also known as. These are a Cornish and Welsh kind of traditional folklore that's been carried here by miners who work in mines. You see a little picture over there, the little guy with the hat. They look pretty much like leprechauns of Irish fame and brownies of the English fame there. And what happens is, these guys are very mischievous, and they cause harm to people, and they supposedly knock on the walls, and you hear these knockings, and the next thing you know, the whole cave collapses on you. But scientists and unfortunately miners know that, as when the walls are giving out, it will make some very loud sounds on the walls as well. Raystown Ray, we were just talking about that over here in the little speakers central over there by the wall. Raystown Ray is a kind of the Loch Ness Monster of Pennsylvania. Why not? I didn't talk about Bessie. I didn't realize that. I guess he is in Erie, Pennsylvania. We like to hold him as our own here, in the Buckeye State is our own. Although we do argue with Canada quite a bit over who owns that creature. Raystown Ray doesn't really have too much of a huge history. I think it's pretty much a marketing gimmick. A lot of photographs like this one here, supposedly of Raystown Ray, there in the water. That was
Photoshop.
What's that?
That was Photoshop.
Yeah, it's not.
Already tested.
Yeah, it's not real. Well, you can just tell by looking at it, but most of this stuff is not real. It's pretty fake. Then we have Thunderbirds, and we're not talking Ford Thunderbirds here. We're talking ginormous birds. Is ginormous a word? It is now. Stan talked a very good speech about these Thunderbirds, and it's incredible. And it's one of those things that you don't really believe in, I guess, until you see it. Because, my goodness, how does a large bird hide? But then you see all kinds of large birds like this one I saw. I was kayaking, I took a picture of that. He was about 8-foot wingspan. And within a couple of minutes he was gone, just disappeared. 8-foot wide bird just disappeared in thin air. So how do you investigate these things? You may wonder, how do we go about all these things and how do we do all this stuff? To keep it quick and simple, essentially you have to look out for two things, two main problems when you're investigating. One is hoaxes, which is an intentional misrepresentation of something. Somebody's going out of their way, like we just mentioned, photoshopping a picture. They're basically lying to you, essentially. Or misinterpretation. A misinterpretation is seeing something you think is one thing, like you think you see Bigfoot here, but really and truly you're only seeing a stump. And this was actually happened in Pennsylvania, from the city. But it was in southwestern Pennsylvania a few years ago, and this person claimed that he saw a Bigfoot. And somebody, I think from California, went on Google Earth, looked at satellite imagery, and determined that it was in fact just a stump. So that's kind of embarrassing when somebody from another state or all the way across the country finds the information or an answer to something that you should have been able to recognize on your own. But it happens. Sometimes we see things, we take a picture, and we think, wow, I have the Holy Grail. I'm going to be on the cover of Time magazine, I found a Bigfoot. Things happen. Right, you guys? Mike, you guys are great. Stuff down. Cats, kitty cats, are often misreported as panthers, cougars, jaguars, leopards, all kinds of stuff based on the the kind of breed that they are. It happens, but like Stan had in the photograph where he was measuring from a branch. We can measure a cat if we know that where it was crossing in front of, we know the perspective and the angle. You can measure that height to determine just how large that cat actually was and how quickly it covered a distance. So a lot of different ways to verify the height and build of a cat. Then yes, you do have Photoshop imagery. You see, this is a little camera here that they're taking pictures of deer. There's a deer running off, and oh my goodness, what's behind it? El Chupacabra. We don't have those in Pennsylvania, so don't worry about that. No blood-sucking animals like the Chupacabra. But if you look carefully, you can go and you can search and you can find the original photograph, which does not have El Chupacabra in it. That's my favorite part, is doing the research to find images of these kind of things, to solve these things, because this stuff is viral. It's all over the internet. It's on Facebook all the time. People are passing it off as different things. But there's always a logical solution 9 times out of 10. UFOs, obviously you have two of the most predominant UFO researchers in the state in this room. That's not me, it's those two guys over there. John and Stan are the best when it comes to UFO research in the state. So my UFO stuff is real small here. Kecksburg, 1965, obviously the Western PA, biggest story of UFOs so far. Who knows? But one that I like to touch on is I actually have a little bit of a personal connection with, in more ways than one, is the Portage County UFO chase. Now, there is no Portage County in Pennsylvania, I don't think there is. That's actually in Ohio. I know, this is about PA, but hear me out. Portage County UFO police chase started in a little town called Atwater, which is about 10 minutes south of a city called Ravenna. I live about 20 minutes away from Ravenna. It depends on how heavy my foot is. So I'm pretty close to this area where this UFO chase started. 1966. They went across the border through back roads into Pennsylvania, and the chase ended in Conway, Pennsylvania, which is about 90 miles recklessly driving from here. So that's pretty close. Now, as far as it's concerned for me, yes, I do live pretty close to that, where it started. Anybody ever see the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind? 5, 6 years? 7, 8, 9. Just kidding. The opening scene takes place in a city called Muncie, Indiana. And it's actually based on this chase, the Portage County UFO police chase. You see the police cars chasing this UFO through down the roads, and it ends up flying off of this cliff, and the police cars, try to stop. Or just one of those silly things that they always write into movies, where one cop car's got to drive senselessly off the cliff. There's no mountains in Indiana, but interestingly enough, I do live where the real one started, and I was actually born in Muncie, Indiana. That's spooky. All right, enough of that one. So how do you investigate UFOs? It's not easy, but it's not hard either. It's not complicated. Keep your eyes in the skies. This is you have to know what is normal. You have to know what these things look like. We just had a very large meteor shower. The Perseids just came through. It's been about a week now since they came through. It's trickling out.
It's trickling out.
They said this is going to be 200 meteors a night. I never saw more than or 200 meteors an hour. I never saw more than like 10.
We recorded 30.
10 an hour. You got 30? That's pretty good. But you have meteors, you have stars, you have planets, you have all these bright things in the sky. Satellites. I'll share a little scientific tidbit for you guys. So, if you're looking up in the sky and you see bright stars, one good way to determine the difference, well, there's actually a couple. One is cheating, and it's using your smartphone to download this app called Space Junk. And if you hold it up to just hold it up in the sky, it'll actually tell you what you're looking at, which is really cool. But if you see a star, stars twinkle. It's called scintillation. And it twinkles, it makes you'll see different colors, and it'll fade in and out. That, a lot of people will say, well, that's from the atmosphere. Well, that's partially true, but the real problem is the distance from the planet, from where you're seeing it, your perspective. Just think about how much space literally is between you and that star. Millions upon millions of miles that we measure it in light years, how far it takes light to travel in 1 year. So then you have planets. Planets are obviously much closer. Relatively speaking. Let's say we're at the screen where the screen is. The closest star, if it's where the wall is back there, the nearest planet would probably be only a hair's length away from that screen, from where we are. That's how dramatic of a difference it is. It's overwhelming to think about that. So when you think of that less distance that light has to travel, there's going to be less scintillation or less twinkling. So when you're looking up and you see a steady light that's not twinkling, pretty good chance that's a planet. And that's your science fact for this Saturday. Yes, you have birds, you have Chinese lanterns. People used to laugh about Chinese lanterns. Well, that's ridiculous. This is the United States. We don't have Chinese lanterns. Well, they're everywhere. Trust me, you can buy them at dollar stores. They're a lot of parties. I've seen quite a few fly through where I live, and they're really, really weird. I'm not used to seeing one. You've never seen one. They look very spooky, the way the light moves, the way the objects move. The wind affects them really strange. Updrafts, downdrafts. They'll flow with the wind, and if there's multiple ones, they'll even do weird things, and they'll form shapes in the sky. It's just, when you see them and you know what they are, it's still mind-boggling when you see them. Airplanes and blimps. I had was very fortunate to grow up near a municipal airport, and one thing you can always remember about airplanes, it's the same as boating. Anybody have a boat, gone boating? The old term is red right return. It's kind of a nautical term. So they also use it for airplanes. And red right return means if you see a red light coming at you and you're in an airplane and it's on the right, you're in some trouble because that means that plane is coming directly at you. But technically it's on the left wing. So it's over here. So you can determine that if you're watching a flying object moving through the sky. Granted, it's not built for the observer on the ground, it's built for the people that are flying around with it. You can determine if it's strobing at a red. Now, there's no specific strobe frequency. But if you see that red strobe and it's going from right to left, you know that that's more than likely an airplane. Same with the green. Green is a little harder to see from the ground for some reason. But if it's going from left to right, that would more than likely be your airplane. And you got drones. Oh my goodness, drones are driving me crazy. There's so many drone sightings all over the world. Right now I'm actually investigating one out of St. Louis, Missouri. I'm not going to have to go out there. Another gentleman who's researching it, he works for MUFON, Mutual UFO Network, is obtaining the footage for that, and we're kind of going at it. I'm kind of doing it from a distance, looking at this footage to figure out what it is. I think it's a drone, personally. And obviously, I mentioned it maybe 10 times. I live in Ohio. We have this cool thing that flies through the skies called the Goodyear blimp. And that's what this is here, if you were wondering, staring at the screen. That's the Goodyear blimp. I was actually kayaking. Next, you'll pop up a picture. Kayaking through this lake, and lo and behold, on the horizon, I see this thing rise up and fly around, and it turned out to be the Goodyear blimp. And I already knew it. You could hear it from, I'm only about 3 miles away from where it's at, believe it or not. And there's a lake that I went to called Wingfoot Lake. Wingfoot is actually home to the Goodyear blimp. And after I got done kayaking at that lake, I drove to where this Wingfoot Lake is, and I got a picture of the blimp, which doesn't get mistaken as a UFO as much anymore because of the bold colors. There used to be this dull gray, and it was gray and black, and it was frequently mistaken for a UFO. So let's talk hauntings. Let's talk ghosts. It's where I came from. It's where I started out at. Famous haunted places here in Pennsylvania. Only a handful of these I've actually been to. The Knickerbocker Hotel in Linesville, which is way north of here. Really interesting location. I had some really strange personal experiences there. We'll picture that there. It's kind of surrounded by electrical wires, and there's a street that goes in front of it. And unfortunately, there's a bar right out in front of it as well, which is probably responsible for more strange sightings than anywhere in the actual hotel. Hotel Conneaut. It's a really cool building if you've never seen it. It's a 150-room hotel. Some strange stories about that. There was a couple on their honeymoon. There was a fire, and they both perished in this fire. So now there's a lot of sightings of the woman in different levels of the hotel, not just the third floor. I think it was room 321 where this incident happened, and she's seen all throughout the hotel. Pretty creepy-looking hotel. Hillview Manor is probably the big one in this area. Never been there, been invited there a couple of times. Eventually, I want to make my way into that and investigate that as well. Omni Bedford Springs Resort in Bedford, Pennsylvania. I should be there hopefully in November of this year, and do a little bit of investigating there. Haven't really researched the stories, but there's a lot of people that work there report ghosts. I know somebody that works there, and there's tons of reports ongoing as we speak. Well, maybe not as we speak, but you know what I mean. Pennhurst State School and Hospital, Spring City, and probably the biggest one here, Eastern State Penitentiary in Philadelphia, home of the Al Capone cell. Lots of cool stories about that. It's all over television all the time. And of course, last but not least, Gettysburg, pretty much anywhere in Gettysburg. So Pennsylvania has a great, rich history, and these are just locations that you can go to. This doesn't include all the haunted homes that people are dealing with stuff in their houses. So you have hotels, you have schools, you have prisons, and battlefields. Quite the paranormal gamut you have. So how do you investigate? Well, I'm probably going to make an enemy over here of these guys. But ditch the tools. Lose your tools. You don't need them. They don't do anything. Trust me, they don't. I've been doing this for 20 years, I can tell you. Tools and technology do not measure ghosts. They're not ghost measuring tools and technology. No matter what you see on TV, that stuff is done to sell cars. To sell cars, I should say. They do. They sell a lot of Fords, and they sell a lot of Chevys, and they sell a lot of Hyundais and Mitsubishis. The tools and technology, they're actually there to find logical explanations. The EMF detector is not a ghost detector. It's actually there to discover loose wiring, bad grounding, a lot of which, yes, can actually halt haunted things from going on because of EMF exposure, which pretty much validated through my work and the work of some other people that I've worked with that have actually written papers on that. So if you can use the tool for what it's intended for, it does help you. But what it does is it pulls your focus away from helping people and paying attention to the environment. Instead of walking around like this, looking at your tool. Oh, geez, there's a table. I didn't see it. I was too busy looking at my detector. Oh. So instead of walking around like this, staring at your equipment like Ghostbusters, pay attention to what's going on around you. Don't worry about what they're doing on TV. Don't worry about what they're doing on the internet. Worry about if you're helping somebody, or if you're in a haunted location like the ones I just mentioned. Look around, pay attention, listen, observe. That's when something's going to happen, not when you're paying attention to a piece of equipment. And I mentioned the E4 method that I created for client-based stuff. Here's a simple math formula that can validate what I'm saying. Living people, which we're all living people, I hope. I haven't put anybody into a coma yet. Plus the environment, which is where things happen. A room, a hotel room, a battlefield, whatever it may be. Those two things together equals an experience. And when I mean experience, I mean a ghost. So living plus environment equals experience. Now, a human being, I can attach little things to it. I can measure your heartbeat. I can measure your brain waves. I can tell where your eyes are looking. I can tell when you're sweating, when you're nervous. All these things we can measure. We can measure you. We can get information from you. We know when you're tired. We know when you're hungry. So we can deal with the living part of it most of the time. Sometimes people drive me nuts. The environment. Now, we can't control the environment completely, especially in a haunted location. It's impossible. The whole thing about a lockdown. Lockdowns aren't controlling your environment. It's just controlling you from leaving. Totally different subject. But the environment we can notate. I heard a dog bark. 9:02 p.m. lasted 16 seconds. An airplane flew over. 9:21 p.m. lasted 65 seconds. We can notate what happens and compare our information we gather later on. So long story short, we can control those two, but we can't control the experience. We can't control the ghost. We don't know how to do that. So ask yourself, why is it that paranormal researchers, ghost hunters, whatever you want to call them, why is it that they chase the ghost? The one thing that we can't control. Makes no sense. And I know I started out the same way. I did all the same stuff. I'm not saying I'm any better. I did the same stuff. I still have tools and technology that I use. I'm just saying we should look at it from a different perspective. But the E4 method does look at the living and the environment and tries to create an experience that we can measure or we can replicate with multiple different groups of people can come in and replicate that experiment. There's no rules. What do I mean by no rules? When we talk about ghosts, we hear about hauntings can only happen when somebody dies a traumatic death. That's really romantic, but unfortunately there's no rule that states that. Yes, it does seem to happen quite a bit, but there's also a lot of traumatic deaths that don't cause ghosts. So that theory kind of flies out the window. But it sells books, so it works. Hauntings versus apparitions. Again, another thing that doesn't make sense. A haunting is something that's imprinted into the environment. It's cyclical, there is no interaction. And an apparition, when you think of the term apparition, you think of a visual thing of a ghost. Well, in technical terms from parapsychology, an apparition is anything. What is heard, seen, felt, or smelled from something that exists beyond the human personality or mind. When we expire, this stuff continues on. But how does it continue on? We don't know. But any part of that experience is technically an apparition. But you have to have intelligence and communication. Those two things combined must be present for it to be an apparition. So there's intelligence and communication. And where this doesn't make sense is a haunting happens far more frequently than an intelligent, communicative apparition. Far more frequently. And a haunting is just, think of like a knight in a courtyard. If a knight, stroke of midnight, a knight's going to walk through here, no matter what we do, banging pots and pans and yelling at it, waving at it, it's just going to continue on its way. That is a haunting. It's going to do whatever it does. Now let's say one day this knight through the courtyard walks out and I start yelling at it. He goes, "My goodness, that is a very ugly orange shirt you're wearing." And then continues to walk along. Well, there's some interaction there. There's intelligence. He noticed the color orange that I was wearing. Probably not a popular color back in that time. So that's an apparition. That's intelligence. So you think about hauntings happen far more frequently than apparitions. Anybody ever watching Ghost Hunters or any of those shows? Paranormal State, I'll pick on that since it's Pennsylvania. Got him where it hurts.
How you did? Well, I mean, I thought they were more down to earth. You know, they are.
Well, they're down to earth, but it's television. And they're doing things they don't want to do. I'm not saying it's them.
No, they love, yeah,
But producers, unfortunately, they want to sell cars. No matter how good you think you're going to represent the field, when you're on TV, you do whatever the producers want. And they'll cut and edit around you.
No, you're right.
I know a lot of people that have said, "I'm not going to fall for this, I'm going to do the job right." And then they stand there and they look after everything's been edited, they're like, "I can't believe I did that."
Right. You're right.
It's just, that's just the way. I'm not picking on
No, they are.
that. But you watch these TV shows, and what's the first thing they do? "Is there anyone here who would like to speak to us? Please tell me your name." So that's interactive apparitions. It's not hauntings. You're not going to get an answer from a haunting. So it's confusing. Why do we do that? Why do we do that? Just started a war, I'm sure. That's that. So 6 keys to success. If you want to become a researcher, an investigator on any one of these topics, whether it's ghosts, UFOs, cryptozoology, these 6 things, write them down, because this is what will make you successful. First and foremost, know what is normal. I was being figurative, but if you want to actually write them down, that would be great. Know what is normal. If you don't know what is normal, if you don't know what kind of animals actually live in the woods around here, if you don't know what an airplane really looks like, or a drone, what a drone looks like, or Chinese lanterns, what they really look like, how can you say that you saw a UFO? Well, you can say you saw a UFO because it's unidentified, flying, and it's an object. But as a researcher, how do you identify that if you don't know what's normal? How do you know it's not a tree stump versus a Bigfoot if you've never seen a tree stump in the wild? I know that sounds silly. But trust me, there's a lot of people that don't know what normal is. And they automatically jump to that huge conclusion. And tied in with that, there's no substitute for experience. Getting out there in the woods, hiking, walking, looking in the sky. I spend a lot of time staring up the sky for whatever reason. It's amazing what you see. And it's amazing, even more amazing what you don't see when you're not looking. But I can spot satellites fairly quickly, and I always try to challenge myself when I see what I know are planets, which planet it is. Always training yourself to identify things in the sky. And I watch lights in the sky to see if it actually is an airplane. If I'm hopefully going to see a UFO. I'm going to see, no, that's just a plane. Shoot. Trust me, I want to see one. I'm like Stan, I've never seen one. I'm hoping one day I do. I've seen a lot of satellites that actually look like they're moving, and they just look like they're darting around. Well, there's this thing called autokinesis, where your eyes will actually make things move, especially lights in the sky when you're looking at a far distance. No substitute for experience, and that also goes in with reading books, especially my cryptozoology book. Thank you again. That kind of stuff helps because it's my experience helping you, so it is adding to your personal experience. When you're dealing with a client case, interviewing early and often. Now, not only do you want to get to somebody's house quickly because if they saw Bigfoot, you want to look for prints, you want to look for evidence, but also they're going to have it fresh in their mind, and they're not going to rehearse it too many times. When somebody rehearses something, it changes. Trust me, your memories are not actually what you think they are. Psychologists will tell you that your memory is not a photograph of what actually happened to you. Your memory is actually what you remembered the last time you thought of the last time you remembered your memory. So your memories as a child, they're not really your memories as a child. They're the memories that you thought of the last time you thought of that, prior to the last time you thought of that, prior to the last time. And I know that a lot of people are like, my head's going to explode. It is confusing, but if you think about it long and hard, tonight when you go to bed, just think about that. Have that question go through your mind, and it's scary. So people also make very horrible witnesses. The case of, what's going on with, there's this poltergeist case in England right now. And people say, well, this is legitimate because the police officers saw things move. And they're trained observers. Well, yes, they're trained observers, but they're people. And they're not used to seeing ghost cases. They're not used to seeing flying objects in people's houses. Now, if they're walking down the street or they're driving down the street in a car, they can tell you all the people that are on the street, if they had their hand in their pocket or suspicious activity or types of cars that they just passed. Those are the kind of things that they're used to seeing and remembering. Not, oh my gosh, not a pen flying across the room. They're not going to be trained to see that kind of stuff. Do your research, and this is a caveat here. Now, just because there was a sighting across the street here of a Bigfoot 25 years ago would not validate a sighting that happened on this side of the street. Now, too much time has elapsed. And a lot of times people they'll look up a Bigfoot Field Researchers Organization and they'll look for Bigfoot sightings that happen in the neighborhood. That doesn't add credibility, unfortunately. But you can look in the area on, let's say, Google Maps and say, well, this place is fairly remote. There's a lot of wooded areas. This makes sense. I had cases on the outskirts of Columbus, Ohio. Now, there are parts of Columbus, around Columbus, that are very wooded. So I didn't automatically dismiss this until I plugged in this lady's address. She's in a housing complex. There's a shopping center here, a shopping center here, a very busy road down here, a little park here, but beyond that there was nothing. I'm like, how did a Bigfoot get to your area? The fifth thing here, be objective. Be objective. And that objectivity is basically observing, watching, not being involved, wondering what people are up to. That's objective. That's what scientists do. They're creepy. They stand there and they have their clipboards and they watch people interact and do things behind one-way mirrors and things. They're not subjective. They're not in the little. They're not sitting watching. Look at this guy. He's crazy. They're not part of what's going on. So, bottom line. Usually, I have a picture of the mystery machine from Scooby-Doo. Bottom line is solve the mystery. Don't think of things in terms of that could be a Bigfoot, that could be a UFO, that could be a ghost. Think of it as a mystery. It's a question. How can I answer this question? What did this person see? To assign an answer before you know is a little crazy. You have to allow the information that you're gathering from the witness, from the interview, from the physical gathering of anything to answer that question for you. Because if you just answer the question, what's the point of you even showing up? Solve the mystery. slide. Last slide. So, any more information about me, you can find my website at briandparsons.com. That's with an I and an S at the end. All my information about all my books, all my appearances, my 6,000 word bio is on there. Everything and anything about me. And I mentioned earlier, if you're looking for an education in cryptozoology or any kind of field that's paranormal related, ghosts, UFOs, or otherwise, I highly recommend these two schools. MetaphysicInstitute.org, which is IMHS, Institute of Metaphysical Humanistic Science. So where I graduated, I have my degree in metaphysics. And TFUniversity.org. Thomas Francis University. Lots of different topics you can study and you can take at your own pace. These classes are not designed to push you through and get you out in and out of a degree as fast as possible. You can also take standalone courses at tfuniversity.org as well. And if you want to email me, Brian at briandparsons.com. I also have business cards up there, the orange table. Made it easy. Orange, get it? All right. Anyway, I also have a show every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Eastern. I have to get up early. My job is horrible. So I do it at 7 o'clock, 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern. And you can listen to that on WCJVradio.com or find the podcast pretty much anywhere. From iHeartRadio to iTunes, anywhere and everything. Questions?
Doctor. What doctor of what?
Doctor. Metaphysics. I have a PhD in metaphysical humanistic science.
Yeah.
Yes. And I did the steps, I took the classes. It's a non-academic degree, so it's not the same as being a physicist, where I went through 15 years of school. It did take me about 5 years to go from bachelor's to master's. I wrote a thesis, which was very fun. It was actually exciting. Most people sweat it
I
out.
was in the military with paranormal. I worked with the NATO team. I had a couple of friends who had your degree. I was teaching about it. You're like a make-believe doctor. It's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work, and even though it's not an academic degree that I have, I still did the work. I studied, I read books, I wrote questions, I wrote.
Well, that's like I said before. You start the standard, and you're creating something for the future that's not been created yet. You know.
And I can't stop learning. That's
No, you can't.
one of my problems. But I'm more scientifically minded, so doing something with metaphysics was challenging to me. But it's more about yourself than anything else. Does anyone have any questions? That wasn't a question. That was a crash.
Dog.
No, Brian, you're on. He's out. He's going in there.
Okay.
You're all right.
Have Bigfoot, I should say, have they ever hurt a human? Have you ever heard of that, Stan? Bigfoot actually attacking somebody?
Very, very rarely. Most of the time, they'll approach people on occasion really close or interested in human activity, but generally, of the hundreds of reports I'll look into, they're not aggressive towards people. There are cases where people agitated them, and they came towards them, but it seems like it's because of people.
Now, there's this thing called, you've probably heard of like gangs, gangs of people. Well, there's this thing on the West Coast. They say that the East Coast Bigfoot is more violent than their West Coast Bigfoot. So there's this East Coast versus West Coast, thuggish Bigfoot kind of competition. But I've never seen that to where Bigfoot is more aggressive in any area. But like you said, like Stan said, if you start shooting at something or you throw something, you're gonna pull that aggressiveness out of it. But I've never heard of somebody just stumbling upon one and then being attacked. Now there has been stuff of people getting rocks thrown at them, but whether that's violent behavior or that's just like get out of my territory kind of behavior.
They don't like people shining bright lights at them.
Anything else? Going once.
Later on, folks, we're having an open forum later, so you guys.
Oh yeah, you can ask more questions later.
Yeah,
Write
we
them
can
down.
ask more questions now. We're gonna have more drawings, okay? Kingwoods, 582184.
The name on the back.
Oh, name on the back. Susan, you here? Sue, you want to? Okay, you got a pie, Sue. Okay.
Oh, that looks good.
Apple pie. Joe O'Donnell. You here, Joe? All right, Joe, you got a pie, buddy. All right, door prize. Number 650973. 650973. No name. Okay. I'll leave it there. Okay. Next prize. That's my work, yeah. Ticket number 650974.
Look at the other side, it's supposed to have a name.
No name. Okay, another ticket. Ooh.
We don't have a
Barbara Rummel. Barbara Rummel. Barbara Rummel. Hi, how are you? You get my picture. I got hit by lightning. Let you know, okay? 3 times. I'll talk about that later. That's why I'm the way I am. I have the orb, everything, yeah, okay? Next, we have a movie passes at the Westwood Plaza Theater, all right? Another name, 651133. All right, we got a winner, yeah.
Congratulations!
There you go.
Yay!
The next one. This is a good one, folks. Hampton Inn, okay? This is a overnight stay that includes the dinner, the movie, the whole 9 yards, okay? The prize is valued at around $300, right? Okay. 650932. 650932. Nobody? Okay, another one.